So now let's examine this diagram of the human nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is really part of the brain, and it has its own, let's say, system of thinking that operates below the level of your conscious awareness, and it drives the function of your limbs and your organs. It doesn't really have any access to higher level thinking, it just reacts to stimulus automatically. The autonomic nervous system is separated into two subsystems, the sympathetic, responsible for fight or flight, and the parasympathetic, responsible for rest and relaxation. The autonomic nervous system goes down through your spinal column and emerges periodically between the vertebrae to attach to your organs and limbs. And the locations where they emerge from the spine form nerve bundles that we call plexuses. Starting from the bottom and moving up, you have the coccygeal, the sacral, the lumbar, the brachial, and the cervical. Your sensory organs have an interconnected web of nerves that attach them to the brain. And I think a notable mention needs to go to the pineal gland, which has apparently nerves similar to optic nerves in it, and presumably is what's responsible for our ability to visualize, seem to see things in our head. And your cerebral cortex is a special layer, a special nerve system in your brain that allows for self-modulation, self-regulation. Animals without access to higher level thinking operate on pure instinct, basically being driven solely by their autonomic nervous system and their limbic system, neither of which is able to actually reason. They simply react to stimulus. And in the absence of conscious, intelligent thought, it drives the body to take action that keeps it alive. Eating, drinking, running away from danger, sexual reproduction, etc. So for example, we go to watch horror movies because of the response that the stimulus provides. Our autonomic nervous system and our limbic system are trying to tell us that we're in danger, but our conscious mind knows better. We're able to rationalize the situation and not react to the stimulus by running out of the theater. Animals that have no access to higher level thinking have no will of their own and are basically slaves to their instincts. What gives humans free will is our ability to self-analyze and self-modulate. And reificationism effectively disables the cortex, removes your free will, and encourages you to behave like an animal. This might look familiar to you as the Kundalini and the third eye and the chakras. And there's a reason for that. It's because these things are symbolic representations of the human nervous system, nothing more. We created these symbols to refer to or point to the human nervous system. They were arbitrarily chosen because we like the symbolic relationship. It's responsible for low-level reptilian thinking, and your spinal column kind of looks like a snake crawled up your ass, and even scientifically we refer to it as the reptile brain for the same reason. Taking things literally is when you remove the referent, in this case the autonomic nervous system, and you mistake the metaphor for a real thing. If you know it's a metaphor, and you know what the metaphor is pointing to, it increases your understanding, it increases your ability to comprehend. But if you don't know what the metaphor is pointing to, and you take it literally, it decreases your ability to comprehend. And a person who habitually mistakes the symbol for the referent is what I'm calling a reificationist. In the case of affirmations, if you tell yourself something over and over again, you can make yourself believe it. And if you think that belief creates reality, it therefore becomes true, which is absolutely indistinguishable from self-delusion. Is there such a thing as self-delusion under this framework? Can you convince yourself of something that isn't true? No, because it then becomes true. So when people try to employ this philosophy, they're performing an experiment, in effect. And you would think that the results of the experiment would indicate to them that it doesn't work, but they justify it through post hoc reasoning. Since the cause is purely your subjective experience, you can look back at the situation after the fact and say, well, my will just wasn't strong enough, or blame it on the alignment of the stars, or the placement of a candle, or any one of a million subjective reasons to excuse failure. And we don't really have the capacity as humans to calculate these probabilities to see if we're increasing the likelihood of any particular effect happening. And on the other hand, even an effect that is vaguely or tangentially related is considered a successful result. One of the most off-putting things about the New Age to me is its liberal use of semantic inversion. Like, for example, redefining self-delusion as self-empowerment, which, in a purely rhetorical sense, turns something negative into something positive, while functionally producing negative results. And just to really drive home the point, I'll give a couple more examples. Meditation used to mean devoting time to deep rational contemplation. And the effect of this activity is to expand one's consciousness through increased awareness. It imparts wisdom and enlightenment. The New Age application of the word tends to entail increasing your comfort level by avoiding rational thought and persuading yourself that things that you want to be true are true, which, regardless of any kind of framing, is self-delusion and self-indulgence. Studies on meditation show that it reduces stress, which is just fairly obvious that if you delude yourself that your problems simply don't exist, that's going to reduce stress. But it doesn't, in reality, resolve those issues. That requires the old definition of meditation, deep rational thought. The new definition is guaranteed to cripple your wisdom, your awareness, your comprehension, and yet it claims those qualities just by adopting the same word. It steals the credibility of the old definition while functionally performing as its diametric opposite. And the New Age is basically foundationally built on semantic inversion, turning vices into virtues. Another example of this inversion is the term open-minded. Open-minded means being open to being wrong, that you might be wrong in your perspective, so that you have to be open to reasoning that could disprove your belief. But in the New Age, belief creates reality. So they effectively use the term open-minded to exempt their own worldviews from critical scrutiny. A person who insists that what you're saying has to make sense and doesn't accept your subjective reasoning is being closed-minded, which is the exact opposite of what open-minded used to mean. It went from a value that I hold for myself to prevent me from believing things that are false, to a weapon that I use against other people to ensure that it's impossible to disprove my belief, because it's my truth and your opinion about logic. So it steals virtue from the real definition of open-minded, but it redefines it to be exactly the opposite. If you believe that reality comes from your belief, that means there's no such thing as dishonesty, and it means that your values can be selectively applied, because there's no objective standard. You can simply lie and just say it's my truth, even if it's demonstrably irrational. Selective application of values is hypocrisy. Getting yourself to believe something that you know isn't true is delusion. Using persuasive but logically false language to persuade people is dishonest and manipulative. These are the actual effects or fruits of the New Age belief, and regardless of how much they throw around the terms love and kindness and peace, it has a net negative result. Believing that the universe is going to bend around your will and not being open to being proven wrong incentivizes narcissism. If someone has a problem with your behavior, that's just something they want to believe about you, which makes it simply a malicious attack on your character. It's impossible for anybody to persuade you that you're wrong if everything's a matter of opinion. You can always reframe who's the aggressor and who's the victim. If reality is simply a matter of belief and personal choice, then you're never going to choose to be the aggressor, and you're always going to choose to be the victim, because it provides you the most benefit. If you accept that reality is a matter of personal belief, that gives other people power over you. They don't have to persuade you rationally, they just have to get you to believe it. And there are ways to get you to believe things that are outright false for the benefit of the speaker, simply through dishonest rhetorical strategy. And if language is arbitrary and belief creates reality, you yourself will also employ these manipulative strategies just as a matter of course. And this mechanically produces a manipulative power hierarchy. And the thing about manipulation is it always reframes itself as positive. And that, ultimately, is what the New Age is and what it does.